The commander of the Imperial fleet stood before the wide viewing glass of his flagship, staring out at the endless stretch of stars. He had seen many skies before. He had marched across worlds that had burned, and he had sailed above planets that had fallen silent after his fleet arrived. For him, war was not new. Conquest was not shocking. It was the rhythm of his life, the heartbeat of the Empire. But this order, this one felt different. The message from the High Council had arrived only hours before. The instructions were simple, almost insulting in how easy they sounded. Proceed to the system designated Sol. Target, the planet called Earth. Secure, subjugate, and report victory. On the large display in the command chamber, the target hung like a jewel in the dark, a small blue sphere, wrapped in clouds, glowing faintly with the light of its sun. To the Council, it was just another primitive world to take, another mark on the long list of conquered names. The reports claimed its people were backward, still fighting among themselves, still chained by their fragile bodies, still struggling with weapons made of metal and fire instead of energy and light. The Empire's scientists laughed when they showed the brief data. They called humans children, loud, reckless, foolish, and blind. A single fleet will break them, the Council had said. They will not even resist. The soldiers aboard the commander's ship seemed to agree. They whispered to one another with eagerness, excited by the promise of another easy victory. Some even joked about how fast the world would fall, how quickly they would paint their banners across its cities. Their laughter filled the halls of steel. But the commander did not laugh. He watched the planet's image longer than anyone else, dared to. Something about the sight of it disturbed him. It was too calm. Most worlds carried a certain weight in their first image. A barren rock looked lifeless, easy prey. A thriving colony shimmered with lights, warning of resistance. But Earth, it sat in silence. Its oceans sparkled. Its clouds drifted slowly, covering the continents like blankets. From a distance, it did not seem weak. It seemed alive. Alive in a way the commander had never seen before. He tried to shake the thought away. He reminded himself of his record, of his duty, of the strength of the Empire that had crushed dozens of species before this one. Yet deep inside, a small whisper rose. What if they are wrong? What if this world is not what it seems? His second-in-command interrupted his thoughts with a crisp salute. Commander, the fleet is ready. Engines await your word. The commander nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the blue planet. He felt a strange heaviness in his chest. It was not fear. He had known fear on battlefields, and this was different. It was closer to doubt. And doubt was a dangerous thing for a soldier of the Empire. Still, he gave the order. The fleet, a vast armada of warships, shimmered into formation. Their metal bodies reflected the cold light of distant stars. Rows of weapons lined their hulls, enough firepower to wipe continents into dust. This was the strength of the Empire. This was the might no world had ever resisted. And yet, as the ships turned toward Earth, the commander whispered under his breath, so low no one else could hear, "Why do I feel this world is waiting for us?" His words vanished into the hum of engines. The soldiers cheered as the fleet began its journey. They believed glory awaited them. They believed conquest was certain, but the commander, staring into the quiet glow of the blue planet ahead, felt the weight of destiny pressing down on him. He did not know why, but he could not shake the thought that this time, the Empire was walking into something it did not understand, something far greater than them all. The Imperial fleet reached Earth's orbit like a storm of steel. Hundreds of warships slipped out of faster-than-light travel, their engines burning with cold white fire. The commander stood at the viewing glass once again, watching as the blue planet filled the screen. From this close, Earth looked even more alive. The wide ocean stretched endlessly, glittering under the sunlight. The green lands peeked through clouds that moved like soft waves. Lightning danced across a distant storm. To the commander, it looked less like a target and more like a creature, breathing calmly beneath them. But the soldiers did not see that. They cheered as the fleet aligned itself, proud of their flawless formation. "Look at it," some of them said. "So fragile, so small." Their voices echoed through the halls. They were ready for conquest, eager to prove themselves, eager to bring glory to the Empire. The commander said nothing. His eyes remained on the planet. That strange heaviness from before had not left him. In fact, it grew stronger. The closer they came, the heavier it pressed upon his chest. He wondered if anyone else felt it. The answer came quickly. "Commander," a voice from the sensor deck called out. "Readings are strange." The commander turned sharply. "Explain." The officer's hands trembled over the glowing console. "There is the interference, sir. The atmosphere is resisting our scans. Every time we push, it pushes back." The commander frowned. That was not possible. Worlds did not resist scans. Worlds were lifeless, passive things, helpless before technology. Yet the numbers on the screen told another story. The sensors flickered, bending and breaking as though the very air of Earth was rejecting them. "Reset the systems," the commander ordered. "Try again." The officer obeyed. Again, the same result. The scans collapsed into static, as though something unseen had swallowed them whole. The second in command stepped closer, his face pale. "It could be human technology, sir. A shield, of some kind." The commander shook his head slowly. "No, not technology." He didn't know why he said it, but he felt the truth in his bones. Whatever force was pushing back, it was not a machine. It was something deeper, something woven into the very breath of the planet. The fleet continued to orbit, circling the Earth like predators around prey. But for the first time, the commander wondered which side was the predator and which side was prey. "Shall we prepare weapons?" his second asked carefully. The commander hesitated. Duty told him to say yes. His orders were clear: attack, conquer, report victory. But his heart whispered differently. He looked again at the glowing seas, the drifting clouds, the quiet continents below. It did not look weak. It looked patient. Still, the commander could not show hesitation before his men, so he gave the order: prepare weapons. The warships obeyed instantly. Enormous cannons slid into place. Racks of missiles locked onto targets across the planet's surface. Energy beams hummed with deadly power. The soldiers cheered again, their confidence rising. To them, this was the beginning of another glorious conquest. Yet as the weapons primed, something happened. The air inside the flagship grew heavy. Lights flickered, consoles dimmed. A soundless pressure filled the room, pressing against every chest, every thought. The soldiers shifted uneasily, their laughter fading. The commander gripped the railing, his eyes narrowing. He knew this was not imagination. The planet below was speaking, not with words, not with signals, but with presence. A silent warning that wrapped itself around the fleet like a tightening fist. "Commander," the sensor officer whispered, his voice thin with fear. "The planet, it feels alive." For a long moment, the commander said nothing. He only stared at Earth, its oceans glittering like eyes beneath the sun. He could not explain it. He could not prove it, but deep inside, he felt the same truth. They had not simply arrived at Earth. They had trespassed, and the world below knew it. The order was given. On the commander's word, the Imperial fleet unleashed its power. 1,000 missiles streaked toward Earth, glowing trails cutting across the blackness. Massive beams of energy roared from warships, ripping open the sky as they descended. It was a storm of destruction, the kind that had leveled countless worlds before. The soldiers shouted in triumph. They expected fire to consume the surface, cities to shatter, oceans to boil. They had seen it happen so many times before that it felt almost routine. Another world, another victory. But this time, nothing. The commander's eyes widened as he watched the weapons vanish. Not explode, not fail, vanish. The moment they touched the thin edge of Earth's atmosphere, they dissolved like dust in the wind. A shimmer spread across the sky, soft and soundless, swallowing every missile, every beam. The planet remained untouched. Blue seas still glittered. Clouds still drifted. Not a single mark scarred the surface. What happened? One of the officers cried out. His hands danced across the console, desperate for explanation. Our weapons, they didn't even strike. Across the fleet, confusion erupted. Soldiers screamed at their failing screens. Technicians pounded on controls. Reports crackled through the comms. Missiles gone, beams gone, shields failing, engines unresponsive. It was as though the planet itself had said, "No." The second in command turned sharply to the commander, his face drained of color. "Sir, the atmosphere. It is not natural. It swallowed everything." The commander clenched his fists. His mind raced. He had seen shields before, defensive technology that could bend energy or block weapons. But this was different. Shields could be broken, given enough power. This was not technology. It was as if Earth had chosen not to allow their attack to exist. "Try again," he barked, though his voice cracked with unease. The fleet obeyed. Another wave of missiles launched. Another storm of beams cut downward. Once again, silence. Every weapon melted into nothing the instant it touched the sky. The soldiers fell silent now. No one cheered. No one laughed. Instead, fear crept into their eyes. On the deck, the air thickened once more. The pressure that had haunted them before grew stronger, pressing against lungs and hearts. It was heavy, suffocating, like standing before an unseen judge. The sensor officer spoke again, his voice trembling. "Commander, it's not the atmosphere. It's something else. The planet itself. It rejects us." The commander said nothing. He only stared at Earth. He felt it too. That weight, that presence. It was not a shield of machines. It was a will. The planet was defending itself. Not with guns, not with armies, but with something far older, far stronger. The soldiers whispered. Among themselves now, their confidence shattered. Some muttered prayers to the old gods of the Empire. Others stared wide-eyed at the planet below, their courage bleeding away. The commander's chest ached. For the first time in his long career, he felt powerless. His fleet, the pride of the Empire, the hammer that had crushed countless worlds, had not even left a scratch. He looked into the deep blue of Earth's oceans, and he thought he saw something staring back. Not eyes, not faces, but a presence, ancient and silent, watching, waiting. "Sir," the second in command whispered, his voice barely audible. "What do we do?" The commander could not answer. His throat was dry. He could not admit the truth, out loud, not before his men. But inside, he already knew. This was not the beginning of conquest. It was the beginning of something else. And whatever Earth truly was, it had no intention of bowing to the Empire. The fleet floated in silence. No more cheers, no more laughter. Only the low hum of engines and the sharp breaths of soldiers who suddenly understood they were no longer hunters. They were being watched. Then it began. The first sound was faint, almost like a whisper drifting through static. At first, the officers thought it was a transmission error, but the sound grew clearer. It was not machine noise. It was a voice. Human. The commander stiffened. The voice did not come from a single point. It came from everywhere. From every console, every channel, every ship. It was inside helmets, inside earpieces, inside the air itself. It carried no accent, no language barrier, no delay. It was a single word. Soft, but sharp as lightning. Leave. The soldiers froze. Their hands trembled over weapons that no longer obeyed them. The voice was not loud, but it was undeniable. It was not a request. It was a command. Then, like a tide breaking against stone, more voices rose. Not one. Not 100. Not even 1,000,000. Billions. Every human voice on Earth layered into one. Men, women, children, old and young, speaking as one unbroken roar. The fleet's comm systems howled under the weight of it, yet not a word was lost. Leave. The sound rolled through the ships, shaking walls, rattling bones. Soldiers clutched their heads, some falling to their knees. It was not sound alone. It was force. A storm of will that pierced steel and entered minds. The commander's chest tightened as he gripped the railing. He had faced enemies who fought with fire, with guns, with blades. But never had he faced a people who fought with nothing but their voice. He realized then, it was not the planet alone resisting. It was humanity itself. Billions of minds, billions of hearts standing as one, their willpower striking harder than any weapon. Around him, systems flickered and died. Screens went black, engines stalled, shields collapsed. The power that had always obeyed them simply refused to work. It was as though the ships themselves were bending to Earth's will, betraying their masters. The second in command screamed, "Sir, we're losing control." The commander tried to reply, but his throat felt like stone. The voices pressed harder, growing louder, shaking the very air. His soldiers clawed at consoles, desperate to fight back. But nothing responded. For the first time, the commander felt the truth wrap around him like chains. He was not facing a weak species. He was facing something far greater, something his empire had never dreamed of. The voices thundered again, breaking through the silence, breaking through fear, breaking through the arrogance of the empire itself. Leave. The word struck like a hammer. Windows shattered inside the ships. Circuits burned. Soldiers screamed, clutching their ears, their eyes, their hearts. It was not only sound now, it was power. Raw, unshakable power born from unity. The commander staggered to his knees, his vision blurred. Yet in the roaring storm of voices, he felt something more than anger. He felt sorrow. Humanity was not shouting because they wanted war. They were shouting because they wanted to be left alone. They were not conquerors. They were protectors, and this was their warning. The commander lifted his head, forcing his eyes open to the blue planet shining below. Its oceans gleamed like endless shields. Its continents pulsed with life. Its people had spoken, and their words carried more strength than any fleet he had ever led. For the first time in his life, he felt small. He whispered to himself, his words, lost under the storm of voices. What have we done? The roar of humanity's voice still echoed across the fleet when the real horror began. The warships, once proud and shining, started to break apart. Not from weapons, not from collisions, but from something invisible, something deeper. Metal groaned like wounded beasts. Hulls bent and cracked as though crushed by unseen hands. The commander's flagship shook violently. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Consoles burst into flame. Soldiers scrambled, shouting, but nothing answered their commands. Systems had died. The fleet's heart was silent. The commander gripped the railing, his knuckles white. His chest pounded as he looked through the wide viewing glass. All around him, ships exploded, not in fireballs, but in eerie silence. They came apart piece by piece, like toys dismantled by a cruel child. Engines tore loose and drifted into the void. Shields shimmered, collapsed, and vanished. Why is this happening? His second-in-command screamed, his voice cracking with panic. The commander could not answer. He did not know. All he could feel was the truth. The humans had not fired a single shot. They had not sent a single ship. And yet, the Empire's mightiest fleet was crumbling like sand in the wind. Across the bridge, soldiers screamed as the eye. Pressure grew heavier. It pressed against their minds, their bones, their hearts. Some fell to the floor, clutching their heads. Others simply froze, paralyzed by terror. The voices of humanity still rang out, layered into one unstoppable tide. Their command did not change, leave. But the fleet could not leave. The ships were falling apart too quickly. Escape was no longer possible. The commander stared into the chaos, his throat dry, his heart heavy. He had seen many battles, had commanded many victories. But this was not battle. This was judgment. He thought of the Empire, proud and arrogant, sending them here with laughter, believing Earth was weak. How blind they had been. How blind he had been to accept the order without question. On the viewing glass, he watched one of the largest battleships twist violently. Its massive body snapped into 2 pieces, then 4, then countless fragments that scattered like sparks. Inside, thousands of soldiers vanished into silence. The commander felt his knees weaken. He wanted to close his eyes, but he forced them open. He owed them that much, to witness the end of his fleet. One by one, the mighty warships were destroyed. Some cracked slowly, like glass under pressure. Others simply disintegrated, turning to dust before his eyes. The sky that had once shone, with the steel of the Empire, now glittered only with debris, drifting like ashes in the dark. A lump rose in the commander's throat. He had once believed the Empire was unstoppable, eternal. But here, above this small blue planet, its power was revealed for what it truly was. Fragile, fragile against a people who refused to bow. The bridge shook again, throwing soldiers to the floor. Warning sirens wailed. The commander's ears rang, but his heart was strangely calm. He finally understood. This was not destruction for cruelty's sake. Humanity was not trying to kill them. The humans were protecting their home, showing the intruders that Earth would not kneel to chains or banners. The commander pressed a trembling hand against the glass, staring at the glowing world below. "Enough," he whispered, though no one heard. "We understand." But it was too late for most of his fleet. In less than a minute, the proud Imperial armada was gone. Hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, erased without a single weapon fired in return. Only his flagship, battered and broken, remained in orbit. It was not spared out of mercy, he realized. It was spared to carry a message the Empire would never forget. The commander stood in silence, his hands trembling against the railing of the shattered bridge. Around him, sparks hissed and smoke curled upward. His flagship groaned like a dying beast, its engines flickering weakly, its shields torn apart. Yet somehow it lived. He did not know why. Perhaps the planet had chosen to spare it. Perhaps humanity wanted someone to survive. He felt the truth, deep inside. He had not been saved by chance. He had been spared for a reason. The commander forced himself to lift his eyes to the viewing glass. The sight before him was unbearable. The once proud Imperial fleet was gone. Not broken in battle. Not defeated by weapons. Simply gone. Erased, dissolved, reduced to drifting fragments of metal glowing dimly against the starlight. The vast armada that had carried the Empire's pride now floated as dust above a silent world. His chest ached. He had led them here. Thousands of soldiers had followed his command, believing in him, trusting his orders, and now their voices were silenced forever. For the first time in his long career, the commander felt the weight of shame heavier than any armor. He had not feared death before, but to live, when his men had been erased around him, that was a burden too heavy to carry. Behind him, a few surviving officers whispered in the smoke-filled chamber. Their voices shook with disbelief. "Why are we still alive? Why us? Why this ship?" The commander had no answer. He only looked once more at Earth. The blue planet shimmered below, untouched, unbroken. Its oceans rolled calmly. Its clouds drifted softly. To the Empire it had been called fragile, but here it was, glowing with a quiet strength that no armada could shake. He felt it watching him. Not with eyes, not with weapons, but with presence. The same presence that had crushed his fleet, now pressed gently against his mind, as though, speaking without words, "We do not seek war, but we will never bow." The message carved itself into him like fire. It was not anger. It was not cruelty. It was truth. Humans had defended their home not because they wished for conquest, but because they refused to surrender their freedom. The commander's throat tightened. His second-in-command turned to him, face pale and wet with tears. "Sir, what do we tell the Empire?" The commander closed his eyes. Images of his soldiers flashed before him, men and women who had laughed on the journey, proud of their strength, eager for victory. Now they were ashes. He could still hear their voices, still see their smiles, and every memory stabbed like a blade. He swallowed hard. His voice came out low and broken. "We tell them the truth." Silence fell again on the ruined bridge. Only the faint hum of the crippled engines remained. The commander looked once more at Earth. In that moment, he no longer saw it as a target. He no longer saw it as prey. He saw it as a guardian, a small but unshakable beacon in the dark, and he felt a strange, bitter gratitude. The planet had spared him. It had given him a chance to return. Not as a conqueror, not as a victor, but as a messenger. He bowed his head, whispering into the smoke, not knowing if the humans could hear him. "Forgive us." The words were soft, but in his heart, they were heavier than steel. The commander's flagship limped through the void, broken, but alive. Its engine sputtered like dying flames, dragging the ruined vessel out of Earth's orbit. Behind them, the blue planet shone with calm light, untouched by war. To the crew, it was no longer just a target, it was a warning. The survivors were silent. No one celebrated survival. No one cheered the escape. Their eyes were hollow, their hearts heavy with grief. Every man and woman on board had lost comrades, friends, brothers, and sisters in the storm that had erased the fleet. The silence inside the corridors was worse than screams. It was the silence of shame. The commander sat alone in his chamber, staring at the star map. The blinking mark of Earth still glowed, but he could not look at it without feeling his chest tighten. He had led thousands to death. He had carried the Empire's pride into a fire it could not withstand, and he had been spared not for victory but for truth. He closed his eyes. He could still hear the voices. Billions of humans roaring together as one. Leave. That sound had not faded. It lived inside his bones. It would live there until the end of his days. Days later, the battered flagship limped into the heart of the Empire. The great hangars opened, welcoming home what they thought was a victorious armada. But when only one ship arrived, torn and broken, whispers spread through the crowds like fire. The High Council awaited him. Proud rulers dressed in their golden robes, their eyes sharp with arrogance. They demanded to know the result of the conquest. They demanded to know why only one ship had returned. The commander stood before them, his armor scorched, his face pale with exhaustion. He spoke slowly, each word heavy as stone. "The fleet is gone." Gasps filled the hall. The council leaned forward in disbelief. Destroyed by humans, by primitives? The commander's voice did not waver, though his heart was breaking. Yes, destroyed, not by weapons, not by armies, by will, by unity, by a power we cannot measure. The council erupted in laughter, though it was thin and uneasy. "You expect us to believe a species of flesh and stone could crush the Imperial fleet? That their little planet could resist us?" The commander raised his eyes. There was no fear in them now, only truth. "I do not expect you to believe. I only tell you what I saw. Earth is not what you think. Its people are not weak, they are unbreakable." The chamber fell silent. The laughter died. For in his eyes they saw something that silenced their pride. Fear. Not the fear of battle, but the fear of knowing one had stood before something greater than themselves. The council dismissed him with anger, calling him a coward, a liar, a failure. But as he walked out, he knew their words meant nothing, because he had seen the truth with his own eyes. Back aboard his ship, the commander stood once more at the viewing glass, watching the stars. He thought of Earth, the small blue planet, glowing quietly, stronger than all the fire of the Empire. He thought of its people who had spoken as one voice, who had shown that no fleet, no empire, no conqueror could ever break them. For the first time in his life, the commander felt hope. Not for the empire, not for conquest, but for the galaxy itself. Because somewhere out there in the dark existed a people who would never kneel, a people who stood as guardians not only of their own world, but of freedom itself. He whispered softly into the stars the same words that had carved themselves into his heart. Humans, you truly are stronger than us all. And with that, the last survivor of the Imperial fleet carried the greatest message the galaxy would ever hear. Humanity cannot be conquered.